Welcome to Horticulture, where a group of extension professionals and plant people talk about the business, production, and joy of planting seeds and helping them grow. Join us as we explore the culture of horticulture. All right, I'm queued up. I'm ready. I want to learn something about you all today. I want everybody to learn as well. Is there a television series that you have seen all the way through, every episode ever made, at least once, but like preferably if you've seen one of them more than once?
Yes.
Okay.
You know my answer.
Series.
I already know some of your answers, but I want the public to know. Jessica,
What? Have you? Yes, of course. Mine is The Office.
And you've seen it multiple times, all the way through.
Multiple times. I love The Office. My husband and I do, and it pains me.
Was that your first series that you ever watched all the way through? I know that you love that series.
I do. I'm trying to think. I've watched all the Seinfelds all the way through, because also my parents were Seinfeld fans.
Mm-hmm.
I'm trying to think what
Parks
other.
and Rec.
Parks and Rec. I love Parks and Rec as well. But The Office is one that I can like always watch, you know? So like I said, it pains me that like nobody in my office currently like gets my references a lot of times. And we had an intern this past summer who is, in his early 20s, and he's watched all of it. So I finally had somebody this past summer I can make references and he would get it. And so like I was like, yes. And so then he would just make them, and everybody else would be like, I have no idea what they're talking about.
I don't know what you're talking about.
Inside jokes.
Well, Ray,
Anybody
what
else?
about you?
Let's see. But my favorite series of all time, probably as far as the series goes, has to probably be X-Files. To no one's surprise here, it's got to be the original weird series. But I was a big The Truth Is Out There fan back in the day. Duchovny and Gillian Anderson. I was a big fan of that. And before then, even more embarrassing, but not really, is Knight Rider. I mean, I was a big Knight Rider, Knight Industries 2000 fan. It's the Hasselhoff.
It was
It's the
Hasselhoff.
Hasselhoff.
Yeah,
Kip, was that the name of the?
Yeah, Knight Industries 2000 Kit.
Kit.
Brett,
Right.
do you have like a comfort series like that you've seen multiple times?
Comfort series, probably not. I've seen Buffy the Vampire Slayer all the way through.
Okay.
I was a fan of that back in the day. Okay.
Yeah.
That one I've never watched. It's on my to-watch list.
I watched it. It was sort of hit and miss, but I really enjoyed it when I could catch it on.
How dare you say it was hit and miss?
I was no, it was hit and miss my ability to watch it.
Oh, I see.
Because I didn't grow up with cable. I only had like 4 channels, so I was very selective on what I could watch I could watch it. Yeah,
it's very campy, very.
It was good. It was a good series.
Time, I think it
was ahead of its time. Definitely ahead of its time.
He's like, I'm not comforted by it at all, though.
I take no comfort from watching this.
There was a lot at stake.
The word Slayer is in the title, so that feels fair.
Yeah,
it's true. It's got a movie spinoff. Yeah.
I've seen the Office. I've seen some of these other ones that people. I've seen the X-Files all the way through. I've seen.
Oh,
yeah. My one of my cousins was really into X-Files. My uncle was really into Buffy. Had like the DVDs, so I just borrowed them all from him. That's how I watched them on DVDs. I remember being up late at night and watching them late into the night, and then you have to get up and change the disc.
That was back in the good. I mean, I won't say the good old days, just because. But it seems like even though Netflix is really easy to binge watch stuff, I did better, Brett. It's interesting you bring up like box sets. When I had box sets and would borrow that whatever from a friend, I knew that I had to kind of watch that within a reasonable amount of time and give it back eventually.
Right.
I was much more of a completionist when I had box sets of DVDs. Yeah. I did a lot better.
I watched House on DVD like that.
It was a great series.
I remember watching House.
It was a great series. Yeah.
So last episode we were talking about cracking open shelled nuts from our stockings off the boat, from the old country, and now we're talking about DVDs, and we're really relating to the next generation.
Yeah. Don't get me started how upset I was with my newer vehicle, and I doesn't have a CD player for me to listen to all my CDs.
How are you going to listen to your mix jams?
I still have some from high school.
Jessica's been accosting youths at Christmas parades recently. I mean,
I have. But it's a good time. Good time had by all, except those tween girls.
Yeah.
Anyways, Alexis, what about you? What's your comfort
as
show?
you all keep saying them, I realize I've seen a lot more than I originally thought all the way through.
She's thinking about it now.
Yeah.
Well, we have the box set of The Office because, which is always fun when I forget that we're watching like a DVD and I'm like, why isn't it going to the next episode? And it's because all the episodes are done on that DVD. So I've seen that. I've seen the X-Files. Tyler and I will just like get on a kick where we find something that we've not watched in a while. I've seen or at all, and that's all we watch until they're gone. So I've seen Scrubs.
That's a good one. Yeah,
Scrubs, The Office, Gilmore Girls, X-Files.
That's another one. I forgot about Gilmore Girls.
Yeah, I know. You start thinking about it and you go, oh, do I watch too much TV?
Friends. I know you guys have probably seen a few Friends episodes.
Though,
right? Friends. Yeah, How I Met Your Mother. I've seen all. Well, and with Friends, I've seen all but the last episode because I didn't want to watch it because I was like, it will make me sad. And there's a couple series where I've watched everything but the very last episode because I'm like, I'm not ready for it to be over.
Do you all feel like do you ever watch movies anymore?
I'm actually more into movies now because I'm getting to the point where I feel like if I start another series and don't complete it, I'm starting to feel guilt and there's not as much commitment for a movie. So I'm actually watching more movies now than series.
We literally watch the movie Cars every day.
Over and over again.
So that's theirs. Yeah, yes. My brother's was Finding Nemo. So I've seen Finding Nemo about 8 billion times.
Yeah. And it amazes me how like into it they get every time. Like at the end, at the final race, they'll like stand up and cheer.
They completely know what's going to happen.
Act surprise. Like when things happen.
Lose their minds. Yes, it's so cute.
Is your memory just not good yet? Or is this just part of the fun of being a child? I'm not sure.
Yeah, we should flip this conversation completely, though. I don't want to drag the point down. It was a great starting question. But is there anything that you haven't seen that everybody else seems to have seen and you're just at a point of resistance now?
Game of Thrones.
Yeah, you really should watch that, Alexis. I will bring you the box set.
I'm at this point. I'm like, I've held out this long, so why do it?
Yeah. Now you're just like being Jessica obstinate.
With eating McDonald's. She's like, I've not had it in so long. So
you haven't had McDonald's? Oh, not never, just not in a long.
Since October of 2017.
Brett, what did you mention something that was popular that you?
I have not seen. I have not seen Frozen.
You're just gotta have to go see it, man. Let it go. Just go see it.
1 or 2.
Yeah, I don't think I've seen number 2.
I can hand you the DVDs.
Yeah.
But now it's like a point. You're just like, well, I've not done it.
I have not seen any of the Twilight things.
Oh, yeah. I've watched all of those. I was a little embarrassed to admit, but I've watched all of those.
Even though I've had multiple people like, you should just watch them. They're just like entertaining at this point. Like you
would not cross the picket line from.
Yeah.
At this point, you're just not.
Scab. I like that.
Right.
I'm going to do it. But,
I did not know there was a standoff between Harry Potter and Twilight. I didn't.
I feel like it's like the matter of like a couple of years. So like Jessica's a couple years older than me. So like Harry Potter, it was like really big for me too. But I feel like Twilight, I was like at a younger age to appreciate Twilight in a different way.
Wolves.
Right.
Ooh.
Mm-hmm. Just saying, just throwing that out there.
Yeah. Sometimes I get to a point if everybody's like recommending whatever movie or whatever series. I don't know why, but I get to a point I'm just like, listen, at this point, I'm not going to watch it just because it's a matter of principle. Sometimes I'll get to that point. And in the wintertime, it becomes more of a discussion when the nights are longer than days are shorter. And these are the kind of conversations we have.
And then I just watched Lord of the Rings and The Hobbit all over again.
I started again. I started all the animated series.
Now, if we're talking about like movies, we can all agree that probably everyone on here has watched the Lord of the Rings series multiple times.
Yes.
Do you agree with that? Yes, we all agree with that.
We're the extended cut family. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Did you answer the one that you haven't seen that everybody else has, Ray?
I'm trying to think because I am a kind of a little bit of a trash panda.
Because
I
I've seen
watch
everything.
I've watched a lot of things. I don't know that I'm at the point of resistance to anything currently. I don't know.
Yeah, I'm not actually resistant. I just the opportunity to watch Frozen doesn't present itself to me very much, and
Yeah.
actually never really.
We used to watch more of
I
the
just went out
animated
and
stuff.
bought it, so I don't know what do you mean by like represents itself. Like it just happens. I was just like, oh, it's out on
Alexis is
DVD.
going to
I'm gonna go buy.
present you with an
But you'd
opportunity to watch
you'd
it.
already seen it though.
No, I'd never seen it.
You bought it to watch it?
Yeah.
Oh wow. Is this like 1994?
It was a
No.
Disney
I mean,
like
it was
special release
pre-COVID,
Yes,
so like
special
basically,
edition.
yes, it was
from the vault.
1994.
I gotcha.
Well, we are a plant podcast, and while we could probably come up with some good, maybe we should do a whole episode on just like
Plant and
flaws
popular
and
culture.
plants we've seen in movies.
Yeah.
Yeah, or like TV shows. Like this is getting kind of talked about. I am not a big fan of Walking Dead, right?
I've not
But
watched
it did when my husband tried to make me watch it. Like,
Didn't go well.
zombies are supposed to have taken over everything, and like society has gone away, but the lawns were like perfectly manicured.
Yeah.
Like, right, there are these beautiful hydrangeas, the lawns were mowed, all this stuff, and I was like, this is not
It was
right.
early in the timeline, Jessica.
Wasn't there like a whole thing that came out there, that movie, what was it called? The one where they had to be quiet or the aliens would get
Quiet Place.
them?
Yes.
Yeah. And so there's like scenes in there, and it's like multiple years after the aliens invaded and society has fallen, and there's like perfectly straight rows of corn, and it's like you can't use tractors, they're loud. It's like that corn doesn't come back every year by itself in Iowa. Like and it was like plant people are furious.
I didn't actually know, but that was a prequel to The Office. People don't know that. Most people don't know that.
Yeah. A not quiet
Missed
place.
that.
Yeah, that was pre-Pam.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
long
back when things were quieter.
Well, anyways, on to the plants. We are talking about microgreens today because it is winter, and it can be hard to think about, or you can miss being able to maybe grow something fresh for yourself. And so I feel like microgreens are a fun way to be able to still grow something that you can eat, something that you have grown, and it's very quick return on investment, and I feel like you get a lot of satisfaction because it's just so fast. It's like every week is, you have fruits of your labor every week happen. Has anybody
last week we talked about like dish gardens and terrariums, and we had a little bit of a side note to that it's not producing typically any food. Well, this is kind of just the opposite. Mm-hmm. It is something that you can grow just about any time during the year, but it actually is food that can be used lots of different ways. I guess a good place to start, you guys, talking about this conversation is, you've already mentioned the term microgreens, but when I hear like eating young plants, there's kind of three broad categories, like immature plant parts, mm-hmm. whatever. It's kind of three broad categories that I kind of lump everything into, and that I've seen lumped into is the first one is sprouts, which is basically you're eating everything. It's a process that I don't do a whole lot, and we probably won't talk a whole lot about on this episode, but it's sprouts. You eat every part of the plant. It's the youngest. And next in the middle is microgreens. It's a 14 to 21 day, very young plant, sometimes has true leaves on it. And then I see this third class that I've come to just call baby greens, and it's more mm-hmm. of the 30 to 40 day. It's still immature, but it's older than microgreens. So sprouts, microgreens, and baby greens. Mm-hmm. And today we're talking about microgreens, which is sort of right in the middle there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Right.
They're fun. They're easy.
Have you guys, go ahead, Alexis.
Yeah, I was gonna say they're really easy to grow. Like I like to do them with kids again, because it's like something very quick turnaround, and it's fun to watch because the way you're growing them is you're not using any soil, so you really get to like experience the growth, from seed to harvest, and really be able to see it. And also, there's like some interesting like flavor combinations and things that you might not normally think of as being something edible. So, an example is like sunflower microgreens, and so sunflower like shoots. And so we normally, I mean, you think maybe about sunflower seeds, but you don't think about eating the plant itself. And so, that's actually one of the things you can grow. They're really high in nutrients as well for how small they are, like relatively speaking. And so that can be kind of a fun thing to, add to salads for a little bit of extra flavor or a nutrient boost, or sandwiches. And again, I think there's just something like, for me as a plant person, that's exciting about like having something actively growing and like feeding myself with that in the middle of winter. It's just, I don't know, it feels better. Something feels good about that.
People, it's interesting when we say microgreens, I guess it's not very descriptive, and people think it's more exotic than it really is.
Mm-hmm.
So usually when I talk to folks that are new to the concept there at the office, we're talking about what microgreens are and are not. We sort of giving you the three, typical classifications of plant based on really age. But with microgreens, we usually start at the beginning, and people ask, well, what kind of seeds? And you've already mentioned some, Alexis. Those are the larger seeds you just mentioned, like beets and sunflowers. So you can break the different seeds down into big seeds or small seeds. But it starts with the seeds, and people ask, well, where do you get these seeds at? And I'll mention to people that broccoli is a microgreen. That's an option. And they're like, oh, so we can just go and get broccoli seed and do that. But what I encourage people to do when you're first learning about microgreens is, since they're pretty readily available from online order sources, is do get seeds that are meant for microgreen production. They're not going to have any kind of fungicidal coating or anything on there. No seed treatments. That's sort of important, because remember, we're talking about microgreens, something that grows 3 to 4 inches off of potting soil, or we'll talk about like grow mats here at some point, but it's growing very close to the growing medium, so you don't want any kind of seed coating. So that's important. But microgreen seeds, there's all different kinds of mixes. You can get themed mixes like a mild mix or a spicy mix that'll have 5 to 6 different flavor combinations in a seed pack. And those are really super available. In fact, the last couple of years, I've stopped at my local box store. I won't mention any names. It starts with a wall, ends with a mar, but like a local supply source. And they have this incredible selection of microgreens. We talked about on the last episode, succulents had become so available. And I had not realized, you all, that microgreen seeds, you can just go and buy them now at common local sources. Have you guys found that at your local, like, box stores?
Yeah, I've started noticing that more at box stores, or even some of our like ag supply stores who carry like, some seeds that they have started also carrying those as well. But easy, like you mentioned, like easy to find with most vegetable seed catalogs. There are a few out there who kind of specialize in microgreens, and they'll have wide varieties. Or they'll have like some just general selections, like you said, like a spicy mix versus not, but very easy to find. And you make a very good point of saying, like, well, if you have some leftover broccoli seed from last year, maybe not use that, just in case it had a seed treatment on it. Because like you all said, they're very, very short when we're harvesting them, and a very small window right there. And we don't want to accidentally cross-contaminate or get any of those chemicals,
And the
ingest any of
seeds,
those.
really a pack of microgreen seeds, a mix. It's pretty common to get them in some kind of mix, like a mild mix or spicy mix. It's not just a single run of beets or a single run of arugula or whatever, or lettuce. There's all sorts of microgreens. Once you dive down that hole, there's even wheat and some, like Alexis said, sunflowers, buckwheat, all sorts of things that, like alfalfa is a microgreen that I really enjoy. But, and that's why I love these as kids projects. You can talk about like wheat and alfalfa, and they're like, ew, our cows eat that. And that's an awesome discussion point, that when you eat these things at a tender stage, and that's essentially what microgreens are, it's different, and the nutritional values there, the tenderness is there, and lots of flavor for such a small little tiny plant, product, but it starts with the seeds, and those are readily available. So that barrier for most of us has been taken out of the way. You can find the seeds easily, either online or at your local store. And I guess talking about microgreens, the next step is, containers, but really that's not anything special, is it, you all? Because microgreens don't take much of a volume of like potting mix at all, if you're using like a potting mix.
Yeah, and one just like on the seed note, if you aren't able to find like the mix, or maybe you don't like what's in the mix, first of all, I would say try it, because the microgreen version of it might, be exciting. But if you don't necessarily want a mix for some reason, and you're worried about, well, how do I know if it's been treated or not? An easy way to go is if it's organic, because organic seeds are not treated. And so then you can feel a little bit more safe there. But if they say, untreated raw seed, it doesn't have to be organic, but that's just kind of like an easy way to cue yourself in on that. So I just wanted to kind of point that out as well. In case, you can't find the mixes, or you want to buy bulk. So if you were going to do microgreens, we on this podcast, we kind of talk about, a lot of the time we talk about like home stuff or larger production things. We try our best to kind of have something for everybody on each episode. And microgreens, I think, are a really great example of that, because there are people who are doing, even in the state of Kentucky, who are doing, what we'd consider commercial production of microgreens, and they're selling to restaurants, or they're selling at a farmer's market, and they're doing large quantity. So they're buying seed in bulk. They're buying big bags, 20-pound bags of radish seed that they might be using for microgreens. But you can also do this, in your own home with, when I've taught it before, we collected from our office staff, our FCS agents who would be doing programs on food. They always had like fresh fruit containers or something like that, those little plastic clamshells. And so we would save those and use those with, our little workshops where we do microgreens. And you can grow them on something as simple as like a wet paper towel, which can, require a lot more maintenance, but is cheap and easy. Or you can just put a fine layer of potting soil in there as well, if it's something that you might more readily have on hand. And so anything that drains and can hold in some humidity is perfectly good to use,
especially during germination. And before we move on from seeds, we've already mentioned it, but it is good to know if you have one of the larger seeds, the seeding process is going to be a little different. A beet seed or a sunflower seed's going to be a different process than the tiny little broccoli seeds, where those seeds basically you're putting right on top of the soil in whatever container you have, an inch and a half, 2 inches of soil, or, whatever process you're using there. The tiny seeds you're just putting right on and kind of just pressing those seeds in. And that's a common failure point, as I've had during workshops. I see people scruffing that in with their fingers. And I tell them that that's going to go too deep, because number one, you're seeding these seeds at a much thicker rate, because microgreens, you want them really, really, really thick.
Like
almost carpet. Like a head of hair. Yeah, like a carpet. You're wanting them very thick. And that's one of the differences in seeding microgreens, is you're putting them thicker. But with tiny seeded things, you're just basically pressing those into the soil. If you have something big like a sunflower seed, there may be, you'll read in literature that it'll say soak for 12 hours. And you can do that to speed up germination. But the seeding process is different in that you actually can cover those with potting soil, some kind of soilless mixture when you're seeding those. So it is a little bit different seeding process, tiny seeds versus big seeds. And there's a lot of the bigger seeds that have a soaking requirement. And the easiest thing to do that is just look at reference material. And all that's going to do is just speed up the germination rate on those larger seeds for you. So you'll run into that when you're first getting started. But be careful. I forget, you guys kind of help me out here. There's some seeds that will absolutely slime up. Is it arugula that if you get it wet, it like slime? There's some certain seeds that have a seed coat that if you soak them, they develop a slimy substance.
Is a one a lot of people know.
Yeah. So watch out for that. That's a kind of a pro tip.
That's not a bad thing.
The vegans actually use that to their advantage when using chia as a food product to make like a pudding kind of type vibe.
Oh, I've seen it. I think it's like a flax from flaxseed, and they'll use it as a substitute for like egg whites because it's kind of a
Oh, yeah.
similar texture to egg whites.
like
I've
texture.
seen,
Yeah.
A flax egg is in
yeah, flax egg. Yeah, I was like, I've
many
used that
a
before.
vegan recipe.
Yeah.
My wife and I were vegan for I don't know 7 or 8 years. So I didn't
just
eat
be
the
aware
chia.
of
The
that.
chia stuff is not my thing. But I'm also not a big okra person for a similar reason. Slime is
not into the slime.
With okra, that wouldn't be a problem, Brett, if you just deep fried it in a heavy coating of bread.
now that I can get down with.
Me too. I'm right there with you, Brett. But with seeds, just know that not all seeding processes are exactly the same. They're a little bit different. When you get your container ready, just be aware of that. If you're kind of doing it on your own, pay close attention to the literature that you're reading and the type of seeds that you have. So,
have you all seen the racks, the microgreen racks that people market?
No,
it's like they actually remind me of like there's racks that people use for like breeding snakes and rats and stuff, but it's basically like a sliding drawer. I don't really know that that's a reference point that anybody else is gonna know. So
everyone's face right now. We know this is an audio, but
now I'm like, now do I want to Google this? I don't know.
Yeah,
it's not as exciting as you might expect. It's a basically like a metal framed shelving unit that is built in a way that sliding like hard plastic tubs go in and out, kind of like drawers. And so you slide it in, and in the case of the microgreens, there's usually lights, and sometimes there's water injection and other stuff like that. So you can sort of have these drawers of microgreens growing. And I've actually seen, maybe we could talk about this. I'm not trying to derail us, but I've seen microgreens held up as sort of like I wouldn't say get rich quick scheme, but in a kind of like, you can get a microgreens rig, and here's how you can make $10,000 a month with microgreens or something like that, like on YouTube or places like that. So maybe we could talk about that. But
I know commercially
there are
that's
some
a big
racks that are kind of cool.
Hey, that's the thing, Brett, with commercial production. People that are doing microgreens, for a sort of a pay scale kind of thing, is space is the biggest issue, because you have flats of microgreens in whatever size containers. They take up a lot of room, a lot of shelf space. So I could see why they would want to innovate, in that area and just have kind of a stack of things. I could see that. Yeah, space is at a premium when we're talking about microgreens. So. Where does that leave us? I guess there's soil next. We talked about that, like a sterile potting medium. By the way, don't reuse if you use a potting soil. That's one thing in microgreens I go over with classes is don't use it. Once you use it once, don't throw it away. One and done. Put it out in the garden. The reason being, we'll go back to the fact that microgreens are something that grows close to the soil. And you don't want that soil to get contaminated and then splash up, depending on your watering system, onto the microgreens themselves. So just use that once and throw it out. A good quality potting soil is the most common thing to use with my classes. And it's only, once again, just a thin layer of that, as Alexis said, a very thin layer.
And I was going to go into so if we think of soil, we can talk about the mats too, but I think, it gets brought up with soil, thinking about like fertilizing, which that's not something that you need to do with microgreens because they're just growing for that short window, and there should be enough energy from inside that little seed to pop out that little microgreen for you.
Yeah. And that, in fact, can be a problem. I'm glad you brought that up, Jessica, because a lot of the soil mixes now, they love to put premixes of fertilizer in potting soil. Love that. So the hard thing now is I actually look for potting soil that has no fertilizer added whatsoever, because that'll cause your microgreens to get leggy, and that's a super common problem for them to get leggy. In fact, commercial operations, you'll see fans on microgreens to actually provide movement, with the density of plants you have in there, and that makes the stems straighter and stronger. But now if you have a bunch of fertilizer in there, the legginess is going to be a problem. You don't need that, as Jessica said. So look, as you're looking for supplies, if you're going to try microgreens, look for some kind of soilless mix that does not have any fertilizer.
And then there's the mats that a lot of, and from like a commercial standpoint, you'll see them a little bit more often. That, I mean, I've seen like wool, like they're like almost like a
Let's see.
it makes me think of the like batting that you will see in a quilt. I don't know if you guys
Oh,
know what I'm talking about,
Yeah.
like the white
yeah.
I know what you're talking
batting.
In
about.
between the
Yeah.
high
Yeah,
density
that's what it looks like.
batting.
That it's something that comes like in a
I've
roll, and
seen the
it's
cocoa
about an
fiber like
inch
that.
or
Yeah.
something like that. That's what it reminds me of. That's not what it is, but that they'll actually grow those seeds in. And so again, that
Yeah.
key is having the media, whatever it is that you're using, damp and moist, and then making sure those seeds are in good contact, and then kind of overhead misting them and creating an environment where they're going to germinate where it's warm and moist. So those are pretty interesting. And then they shave them off. So they like, it's almost like a little pair of hedge trimmers, and they just kind of go right down at the base and they shave
Yeah.
them off into your clamshell or into whatever it is that they're selling them for,
I've
usually
seen the
bags.
microgreen kits, Alexis, at the farmer's market where they sell the mats and
Mhm.
everything in the little clamshells.
Mhm.
And that makes a cool little kit. And now the mats that we're talking about, the hydroponic mats typically is just the class of mats that they are, but they only work for the small seeded stuff. They will not work for the
Mhm.
large seeded stuff because
Mhm.
they either take dark or they have to be covered or both.
Mhm.
So it wouldn't work for sunflowers, but it'll work for small seeded things. But the mats are so cool because you have this little, usually perfectly cut square mat that matches some
Mhm.
little clamshell container, and you can sell it as a living kit. Because one of the things about microgreens, I don't know about you guys, but when I have them sitting in a windowsill, I do not cut those rascals until I am ready to use them because they
Yeah.
don't keep
Right,
very
because
well
they
in the
don't yeah, they have
refrigerator.
a
Yeah.
short shelf life,
I
right?
learned that the hard way. I not only did I cut them and did not use all of them the first time I ever grew them, is I decided to rinse them a little bit. So they
Mhm.
basically turned to mush in about a day and a half. So now I don't try to only cut in whatever container I have. I cut the microgreens that I can use at that time.
And
So
still cut, then rinse and consume.
yeah.
Just,
Mhm.
like, don't rinse in advance like you.
No,
Yeah,
no,
so but
no. I made
still give them a
mistakes were
rinse.
made. Yes, mistakes were made in my case, but if I'm using them fresh, fresh running water, rinse them off good. But that's something about the mats that I think is cool, Alexis. That I see those at our farmers market, they're starting to
Mhm.
use those commercially in those living kits. But now at your all's markets, you mentioned that you've seen those where they've actually pre-cut the microgreens and put them in a container. What I've seen them that way too. It seems like.
Yeah, usually when I see them like for sale, they're just like it would be, any lettuce or something like
Yeah,
that. But
like a
usually it's
green.
in a clamshell, and they cost quite a bit per pound
Yeah, yeah,
because they are very like labor intensive, and like you said, they're very perishable, which kind of lends
Mhm.
itself back to the it's not really the get rich quick scheme unless you're really really dialed in and able to sell them quickly, because they really don't have they don't last. So these people are
Right.
cutting them the night before,
yes.
at the most, and putting them in the fridge and then bringing them directly to market.
Going back to the mats, you can reuse those, right, by flipping them over? Like,
Yeah,
I've
you
heard
can
that before, right? So you could
if
get
you're at
may
home,
possibly
yeah,
2 uses out of them,
Mhm.
yeah,
right?
and
Like,
they're
yeah,
clean
you're
on
like
the other
home
side.
production. Yeah.
Yeah, because 'cause they're
Versus that
dense, and
soil we're
when you
gonna
flip
throw
them
out.
over, yeah. I've heard that a lot, and I've actually experienced that, is but you have to trim them very carefully or they don't lay flat, and that really bothers my
Mm.
type A brain. They're kinda bumpy, but yeah, you flip them over and it's a brand new mat. So that's a case where you get 2 uses out of that mat, and which is kind of a nice perk to
You don't
using them
like the
that
way that those bumps channel the rolling hills of Central Kentucky?
it channels my discontent, but I see what you
Oh,
did there.
it's a little landscape, a little just a little,
Yeah,
think of
the
it as
rolling
think of it as your
hills.
dish garden, it's
I know.
you're
I need
crafting a
to.
landscape.
I need to chill out about my bumpy
Chill out
microgreen
about the bumpy
landscape.
mats, Ray.
I
Jeez.
do. I do. I need to chill. Hydroponics to me is about control, Brett. It's about control. But yeah, that's I do like the mats are super cool. And Alexis, you mentioned watering, which another kind of pro tip. If you can pull this off, we've already mentioned, be safe with microgreens. Be very careful how you water those. Number one, if you water a lot overhead, they'll tend to get diseases, and then it just wipes microgreens out very, very quickly, especially if you're a commercial producer. If there's any way you can come up with a kind of a 2 container system, and it's easy to do at home if you have two like semi-disposable plastic containers, you can nest those together with the top one having holes drilled in it, and that's what you're growing the microgreens in. And you can like lift that up, water from the bottom, then set I'm not painting a very good picture, but set the second container back down in. Any way you can accomplish bottom watering is the absolute best to never get the microgreens wet. I mean, that's ideal. Now, it's kind of hard to pull off sometimes, especially if you don't have a bunch of extra containers. But the less you can get the tops of those little guys wet, the better you are, because it's high density, high humidity scenario, especially if you're growing a bunch together, and fans and stuff help the commercial producers. But still, it's tough if you're constantly getting those wet.
And when we say high density, like we really mean like it will look like a carpet, like the seeds are going to touch. So when I'm, radish seed is a very small, I mean, it's bigger than a piece of pepper or something like that, but it's a small circular seed, and you're going to lay them out where you basically can't see the media underneath them. So they are a full thickness, which is why the humidity builds up with them as much. But you get more bang for your buck, but you spend more money on seed. So you see what I'm talking about here? Just the trade-offs going on.
It's a give and take. So we've got the seeds. We've got any kind of container that's kind of handy. That's a clean container. We've got our soil and watering. Jessica, you said we don't fertilize, which we don't. No fertilize needed at all. Another, I guess, a tip that I see where people go wrong is when we're filling containers at our workshops, they will fill whatever container we're using. They won't fill it all the way up flush. And they'll only fill it halfway. And that's a problem because remember, with microgreens, it's really desirable to get as much of that stem as possible. And then they will email me back or text or whatever. They're like, oh, we did awesome with microgreens, but we were losing half the stems because they didn't fill the containers up flush with the top. So they can't get their scissors.
They can't cut them,
They can't. And I never had thought about that.
What are you talking about? I was like, they don't need that much soil. I was like, behind the scenes going, this is wrong. This is not.
Alexa's getting ready to call me out. You should have seen her face. I was like, I better get to the point quickly. Yeah. This monologue is going to turn into a confessional, and I'm going to be
kettle building up.
It was. I was like, how do I tell him he's wrong without making it obvious?
but get that soil up to whatever the lip of the container, and you will be able to harvest, because we use just a clean pair of scissors. Please don't use dirty scissors because you're eating the product that you're cutting. But with a clean pair of scissors, that allows you to actually cut that stem right at soil level, because remember, with microgreens, you harvest once and you're done. It's not like they're going to regenerate because you're taking the growing point of the microgreens away. But keep that in mind. And I'd never thought about that until people had kind of made that comment and actually sent me pictures where like our 3-inch container with 1 inch of soil makes us lose 2 inches of the stem. And I'm like, oh.
So it may be, try to select something that's a little shallower would be the other way of.
Yeah, exactly.
Or if it's plastic, you can trim it. That's something. Yeah. With pots, people are sometimes like, oh, it's this deep pot. Well, if you got a pair of scissors.
I think my experience has either been, the real shallow container, so it doesn't really matter, or like if I'm using an old like raspberry container as an example, right? Those holes are kind of big, so I'll actually line that with like a piece of paper towel, and then I'll put my, little bit of media in there, my soil in there. But if it's still sitting too low, just because I have like a bigger container, because the roots have kind of matted up most of that soil, I can usually pick up that paper towel and like lift them up, pop it out of the container without it getting crazy, and then cut right off there. So I was like, Ray, what are you talking about, man?
He's like, he's going completely in the wrong direction. What?
I was like, how do I tell people that is not how I have done it?
Yeah, that's not the way you do it. But be careful. It's like Brett said, you can, and that's a great suggestion, Brett, that if you have these disposable or, containers that you're repurposing, if they're a thin plastic container, just trim the things. Great suggestion, because potting soil, I guarantee, is probably, or some kind of potting mix, is more expensive than that throwaway container.
Definitely.
That you've repurposed. So there you go.
Or even sometimes if you bought it, the way potting media is now.
That's a great point, Brett. Yeah. Love it. So that's
another in the
freebie.
Back in my day, potting media was cheap.
That hurts, Brett. I mean, that's pretty deep. Potting mix is not cheap, friends.
It's not.
It is not.
Peat is not a renewable resource, unfortunately.
So how many days for you guys that are growing these things up to 4 or 5 inches, how many days do you guys grow off your microgreens?
You grow yours way taller than I grow mine. That could be just what you're growing. So that's part of this.
If you're growing wheatgrass, it gets about 4 or 4.5.
Right. So the let me collect myself here.
After
When you
raising
going back to the sprout, microgreen, baby green, right? So a sprout never has what we call true leaves, which we know that's what we call our listeners, the true leaves. But as a reminder, in the botanical term, true leaf is the first leaf that looks like what the adult plant leaf
like a leaf. Yeah.
Looks like the actual leaf versus the cotyledons. That's more of the sprout stage. And those just look like ambiguous little tiny green things.
So if someone listens to a horticulture episode and they decide it's not for them, they remain in the sprout stage. They have not become.
Stage, yeah.
Nice.
They gave it a shot.
Never make it to microgreen stage.
True leaves are you all listening probably right now. So anyways, microgreens are harvested at that true leaf stage. So usually there's 1 or 2 true leaves of what the adult plant would actually look like. And then after that, if you get more than 1 set of true leaves, it would be considered a baby green.
Yeah.
So that is going to the size, how tall those are is going to depend on what it is. A sunflower is probably going to be taller than a radish. At where they're at, because like the varieties I usually grow, which has been like arugula and radish and those types of things, are usually only about 1.5 inches to 2 inches. So just like for reference, if you're doing this, you can't necessarily go off of the height. You need to go off the leaf stage.
Yeah. The earlier you collect those things, obviously, the more tender they're going to be. But it's amazing how something so tiny can have that much flavor. I wouldn't have believed it.
I know, isn't that crazy? Because it's like a radish.
Broccoli tastes like broccoli, or
a radish
like
microgreen tastes like radish. That's like
schnozberry tastes like schnozberry.
I like. So enough with the boring growing stuff. We've got these things grown up and we're harvesting, and we've talked about keeping them safe. What are the rest? How are you guys using microgreens? I mean, like
sandwiches.
Sandwiches? Yeah, my favorite. We do wraps with microgreens.
Grab like a big bundle of them. It's like a little nest of them. Just smash it on a sandwich.
Yeah. Good stuff.
Because then it's cool because you get that like spicy radish flavor, on your turkey and Swiss. Adds a little extra zhuzh in there. So
fancy soups. I mean, I've seen them in the restaurants, like at least pictured in restaurants as a garnish for like fancy soups. So
or the ones that will get some color to them, like the little baby chards and stuff that'll get like the red stems.
Stuff. Yeah,
and those are pretty like in salads, and again adds like a flavor complex there that. Lettuce might not necessarily.
They're really good in smoothies. Jennifer used them in smoothies. Yeah, she got into this.
I don't know. Yeah, but I know other people not be radish.
She used like lots of kale and all kinds of things like that, but throws those in just to kind of spice it up a little bit when we have a quantity of those. It takes a pretty good quantity though, unfortunately. So
yeah, and that's why where you'll start seeing like the numbers associated, like it's how many dollars per pound, and it's really high in comparison to something like tomatoes. But then you think about how small this product is and how many microgreens.
Is an incredible amount of microgreens. That's a lot of microgreens.
Yeah. And from a commercial perspective, there's a lot of labor involved. I think when I've talked to people who do microgreens commercially and are selling primarily to restaurants or schools where they're putting them like in salads and stuff.
Yeah.
They say that, space is definitely an issue, but when they've converted to going vertical, that helps a lot. But labor, because you're turning them over so quickly, where, some of these varieties they're harvesting in 10 days. So that means that like every day they're having to do, hundreds of trays, and they're going to fill them and seed them so that they have a consistent supply for their market. And so you pay a lot for your labor to be able to. So it's, again, going back to the don't get rich quick scheme. There's no such thing in horticulture, unfortunately.
What?
No.
Just now finding this out.
Yeah, I know, right? I've been farming this whole time. What did I miss?
And if you do find that, you better keep it quiet. We're going to replicate it.
That's right.
We're going to tell everybody on the podcast about it because we don't gatekeep around here.
Microgreens are just one of those cool things. It's a great, you noticed our last podcast, it also involved projects you can do on the inside. And that's what we're striving to do, I think, as plant people around here, is we're looking for the joy in our life through plants that projects that we can sort of do. So dish gardens, terrariums, microgreens, these are all projects that you can do through the winter, either you or your family can do and have a lot of fun with. In this case, Brett, it's got some form and function, mainly function, not so much form with microgreens. Last week was more about the form rather than the function of eating. But yeah, microgreens are fun. I like those, especially for youth projects and lots of school garden. We have lots of discussions on school gardens, but when I work with schools a lot, if we're doing a traditional in-ground garden, they're like, well, when do we need to be? I'm like, well, it's when you're out of school is when most of the learning and growing for a traditional garden takes place. So what we do is substitute a lot of projects like microgreens in that matches the shorter attention span sometimes of adults and younger people, but you can learn a lot in a small amount of time, and you can see things go from a seed to something edible and then use that edible product in a recipe, and it's pretty cool. It makes a fun and tasty project, especially in the wintertime. It's good stuff.
We will put a link in the show notes to some publications that have a good list of things to try. I think it's a nice variety of things that can be used. That way, whatever you can put your hands on. But for the most part, you can use just about anything. And just kind of remember, it's going to taste like the leaf kind of thing, or what the root might be. So like carrots can be one, and they're going to taste kind of carroty, but it's only the foliage. And I say that because like if you were to do tomato microgreens is not a thing, because those are not going to taste like a tomato or a bell pepper or something like that. So I just want to caution you on that.
Don't go too rogue.
Stick with
on
your root crops or your leafy crops for the most part, to get some good taste there. But UK has at least one publication that talks about and has like a really broad list. I think fennel is one I would like to try. Lemongrass I thought was interesting as another one that would be good, but also I feel like lemongrass seed would be too expensive to do that, but maybe I don't know enough about lemongrass seed. Like some of these, you'll think and you're like, this is a really quick way to lose money if I'm not buying cheap seed. But it can be fun. Maybe you can do like a taste test and you seed them all one day, and then you kind of can have like a little taste test of all the different ones, and can you guess which plant it is and things.
Yeah, maybe. And if you just put a little bit of lemongrass like in a mix to accent, then it wouldn't be so expensive.
Yeah, little lemony goodness. Yeah, to your
celery. It's probably pretty relatively powerful.
I would imagine.
I think so. Yeah.
So yeah, give it a shot. They are really easy, and for a packet of seeds, can be really inexpensive for some of these things, and so you can have something fresh to eat and play around with in the middle of winter, really quick for $1 or $2, and so I think that can be a fun thing to do. So definitely give that a shout. Any other thoughts on microgreens? No.
Make yourself a tasty wrap and go at it.
Fun winter project.
I know. Now I'm like, I need to go do this. I need to go find.
It's not a thing exotic, people. It's an easy process. Relatively
got a whole
easy.
Supply of stuff sitting on my desk over here for my
Maybe I should visit my county agent to see if they have any resources for me.
Right. You can come and participate.
I'm laughing because it's Jessica. Jessica is my county agent.
For those of
you who are new around here.
I can see Alexis going to Jessica's office. You better lock your door, Jessica. Alexis will visit.
I just walk through anymore. I don't stop. I'm that bad person who's like,
everyone's just like, people. Hey.
Yeah, I just walk in, and
Alexis is here.
I probably need to act like a normal taxpayer, but oh well. So anyways, try microgreens. If you have questions about them, reach out to us. You can do that on Instagram at horticulturepod. You can also shoot us an email, and that is in the show notes. If you've got a question about them, or if you want us to expand or have other ideas for episodes, we work those in based on kind of time of year and when we think they would be the most helpful. So feel free to reach out on there. And I'm going to try and find, I have an old, not old, I guess it is old because it was COVID times, but a video on doing microgreens for when we were all stuck inside and we had nowhere to go. And so I'm going to try and put that on the Instagram. And so maybe it'll put some visuals to some of this audio that we've had for you today. And I'll do my best to get that out to you guys. But yeah, we hope you will follow us, and we hope that you are enjoying this podcast, and that as we grow it, you will grow with us. Have a great one.